Ever wondered what happens when you dive deep into the chaotic world of Quahog at 3 in the morning? Tonight we're exploring the most bizarre, hilarious, and downright weird facts about Family Guy that'll keep your mind occupied while you drift off to sleep. From hidden Easter eggs to behind-the-scenes secrets that even longtime fans don't know. This collection of random Family Guy trivia is perfect for those late-night moments when you need something entertaining but not too stimulating. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly you're wondering about the strangest details from America's most controversial animated family. Well, you're in luck, because we've gathered dozens of fascinating tidbits that reveal just how deep the rabbit hole goes in Seth MacFarlane's animated universe. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. Family Guy actually premiered in 1999, making it older than The Sopranos, Lost, and even The Office. But here's the kicker. The show was canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after 3 seasons, and then again in 2005 after being brought back for a 4th season. What saved it the second time? DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox had no choice but to bring it back permanently. Speaking of cancellations, did you know that the famous episode where Stewie and Brian get locked in a bank vault was actually written as a potential series finale? The writers thought the show might not get renewed, so they created this bottle episode as a way to give fans closure while keeping production costs low. It ended up becoming one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. Here's something that'll make you appreciate the voice acting even more. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. But what's really impressive is that he can switch between all these voices seamlessly during recording sessions. The man is basically having conversations with himself for hours at a time. Imagine being in that recording booth and watching him argue with himself as Peter and Stewie. Now let's talk about some hidden details you've probably never noticed. In the opening credits, when the family is sitting on the couch, Stewie is always holding a different object. Sometimes it's a teddy bear, sometimes a ray gun, and occasionally it's something completely random, like a pineapple. The animators change this detail regularly, but it's so subtle that most viewers never pick up on it. The Griffin's address has actually been revealed multiple times throughout the series, but it keeps changing. Sometimes they live at 31 Spooner Street, other times it's 29 Spooner Street. This isn't continuity error. It's an intentional joke about how cartoon families can basically live anywhere the writers need them to live for the sake of a gag. Here's a weird one. Meg's full name is actually Megatron Griffin. This was revealed in one episode as a throwaway joke, but it's technically canon. Her parents named her after the Transformers villain, which honestly explains a lot about why she turned out the way she did. Imagine going through high school with that on your birth certificate. The chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken aren't just random acts of cartoon violence. They're actually parodies of classic action movie fight scenes. Each fight references different films, from They Live to The Matrix. The writers spend enormous amounts of time choreographing these sequences to match specific cinematic moments frame by frame. Speaking of references, Family Guy holds the unofficial record for most pop culture references in a single animated series. The writers keep a database of potential references organized by category, decade, and obscurity level. They literally have spreadsheets dedicated to tracking which celebrities they've already made fun of, and which ones are still fair game. Here's something about Brian that might change how you see him. His character was originally supposed to be much more of a background character, like a regular family pet who occasionally made sarcastic comments. But Seth MacFarlane enjoyed voicing him so much that Brian evolved into basically being Seth's mouthpiece for political and social commentary. This is why Brian often sounds like he's giving a college lecture. He essentially is. The Conway Twitty cutaways aren't just random musical interludes. They serve a specific purpose in television production. When episodes run short, the writers can insert these musical segments to pad out the runtime without having to animate new scenes or write additional dialogue. It's brilliant efficiency disguised as absurdist humor. Cleveland's house has been destroyed and rebuilt more times than any other location in the series. The writers keep track of this, and it's actually become a running competition among the staff to see who can come up with the most creative ways to demolish Cleveland's property. His house is basically the Kenny McCormick of buildings. Here's a detail about Quagmire that most people miss. His house number is 29, Peter's is 31, and Cleveland's was 33 before he moved away. But Joe's house number has never been consistently established, which has led to fan theories that he doesn't actually own his house and is just perpetually house-sitting for someone else. The famous "Whose line is it anyway" reference, where Peter lists random words, isn't actually random. Each word was carefully chosen to represent a different category of Family Guy humor. They're basically a roadmap of the show's comedic philosophy, hidden in plain sight. Stewie's accent has gradually changed over the years, from a thick British aristocrat voice to something more American. This wasn't accidental. Seth MacFarlane has said that maintaining the original accent was physically exhausting, so he's slowly been relaxing it as the series progressed. If you go back and watch early episodes, the difference is striking. The Pawtucket Brewery where Peter works is actually based on a real brewery in Rhode Island. The exterior shots are rotoscoped from actual footage of the Narragansett Brewery, though the interior is completely fictional. Local Rhode Islanders often spot familiar landmarks in the background of various episodes. Here's something about the show's animation. The characters' eyes are deliberately drawn to be slightly different sizes. Peter's left eye is always drawn slightly larger than his right, which gives him that perpetually confused expression. This asymmetry was added specifically to make him look more dopey and lovable. The reason death appears so frequently in early seasons is because the writers were originally planning to kill off a main character in every season finale, but Fox executives weren't comfortable with the concept. So death became a recurring character instead of a plot device, which is actually much funnier in hindsight. Lois's maiden name is Pewterschmidt, but her middle name has been given as both Marie and Nicole in different episodes. The writers claim this is intentional, suggesting that Lois has been lying about her middle name for years for reasons that will never be explained. The evil monkey in Chris's closet was originally supposed to be revealed as Chris's imaginary friend, but the writers decided it was funnier if he was completely real and just randomly living in their house. This decision led to one of the series' most beloved recurring characters. Here's something about the show's timeline. The Griffins have been celebrating the same holidays for over 20 years of real time, but they never age. However, the writers occasionally drop hints about the passage of time through background details like changing technology and evolving fashion trends in crowd scenes. The reason Peter's boss, Mr. Weed, died in such a bizarre way, choking on dinner rolls while watching Popeye, was because the writers wanted to establish that anyone could die at any time in the Family Guy universe for completely ridiculous reasons. It set the precedent for the show's approach to mortality as comedy. Tricia Takanawa's reporting segments are all written by the same staff writer who used to work in local television news. All of her ridiculous news stories are based on real absurd stories that the writer covered during his journalism career, just exaggerated for comedic effect. The Drunken Clam Bar where Peter and his friends hang out was modeled after Cheers, but the writers deliberately made it seedier and more depressing to contrast with that show's warm, welcoming atmosphere. It's meant to represent the difference between idealized television friendships and actual dysfunctional male bonding. Here's a weird production detail. The show's writers keep a cutaway database with hundreds of unused cutaway gags organized by setup line. If they need a quick cutaway for an episode that's running short, they can search the database by keyword and find something appropriate. Some of these unused cutaways eventually become the basis for entire episodes. The reason Herbert, the elderly neighbor, is so creepy isn't just for shock value, is inassigned. His character is actually a commentary on how society often ignores obvious warning signs about predatory behavior. The writers intentionally make him so obviously suspicious that it becomes absurd that no one in the show takes him seriously. Stewie's football-shaped head wasn't originally intentional. Seth MacFarlane was just a poor artist when he created the character, but the distinctive shape became so iconic that when the animation quality improved, they kept the weird proportions on purpose. The show's musical numbers aren't just random, they're specifically written to parody different Broadway and Hollywood musical styles. Each song is crafted to sound like it could come from a specific era of musical theater, from 1,930 seconds Hollywood musicals to modern Broadway productions. Here's something about the voice acting. When characters sing, Their speaking voice actors don't always do the singing. Several characters have dedicated singing voices who are professional Broadway performers. This is why some characters sound noticeably different when they break into song. The chicken that fights Peter is named Ernie, and he has his own detailed backstory that's never fully explained in the show. According to the writers, Ernie has a family, a mortgage, and a completely normal life outside of his inexplicable rivalry with Peter. His motivations remain mysterious intentionally. Roadhouse is referenced more than any other single movie in Family Guy, appearing in over 30 different episodes in various forms. The writers have said this started as an inside joke because they couldn't believe how seriously the movie takes itself, but it evolved into genuine affection for the film's absurdity. The Conway Twitty segments were actually Seth MacFarlane's way of paying tribute to his grandfather, who was a huge country music fan. MacFarlane has said these moments are among his favorites in the entire series because they remind him of watching old variety shows with his grandfather. Meg's unpopularity isn't just a running gag. It's a deliberate commentary on how middle children often get overlooked in family dynamics. The writers have given her hidden depths that occasionally surface, suggesting she's actually the most emotionally intelligent member of the family despite being constantly ignored. The show's animation style deliberately mimics the look of 1,980 Saturday morning cartoons, complete with slightly off-model character designs and limited animation techniques. This was intentional, as MacFarlane wanted the show to feel nostalgic and slightly cheap, like the cartoons he grew up watching. Here's a detail about the opening theme. The lyrics were written to sound like a generic sitcom theme song, but they're actually describing a completely dysfunctional family situation. The cheerful melody masks the fact that the words are talking about how nothing in this family works properly. The reason Family Guy episodes often feel like collections of unrelated sketches is because that's exactly what they are. The writers start with a basic premise and then build around it with whatever random ideas they've been wanting to explore. This approach gives the show its unique, chaotic energy. So there you have it. Dozens of random Family Guy facts to occupy your mind as you drift off to sleep. From production secrets to hidden meanings, the world of Family Guy is far more complex and deliberate than it might appear on the surface. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these little details add extra layers to every rewatch. Sweet dreams. And remember, somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably doing something spectacularly stupid, while Stewie plots world domination, and Brian writes terrible novels. The chaos never stops in the Griffin household, and honestly, we wouldn't want it any other way. Hey there, Night Owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some sleep but your brain is still buzzing, you've clicked on the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with some absolutely wild Family Guy facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you awake, pondering the bizarre genius of Seth MacFarlane's creation. Picture this scenario. You're lying in bed, eyes getting heavy, but your mind keeps wandering. Maybe you're thinking about that awkward conversation you had at work, or wondering why you ate that entire bag of chips for dinner. Well, forget all that mundane stuff because we're about to embark on a journey through 20 years of Family Guy madness that's guaranteed to give your brain something much more entertaining to chew on. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. When Seth MacFarlane first pitched Family Guy, he was just 24 years old and working at Hanna-Barbera. The network executives were so impressed with his 15-minute pilot that they ordered the series on the spot. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane had never actually run a television show before. He was essentially handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar production with zero experience as a showrunner. Talk about fake it till you make it. Speaking of MacFarlane, did you know he was supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th? He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but overslept after a night of drinking and missed the flight by just 10 minutes. When he arrived at the airport and learned what had happened, he realized how close he'd come to never creating the Griffin family we know and love today. It's one of those sliding door moments that makes you think about how different pop culture would be if he'd caught that flight. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the family's intellectual dog who walks on two legs and drives a Prius. Brian's character was actually inspired by MacFarlane's own dog, also named Brian, who passed away in the early 2000s. The real Brian was a white Labrador retriever and MacFarlane has said that losing him was one of the most difficult experiences of his life. When the show temporarily killed off cartoon Brian in 2013, the fan backlash was so intense that MacFarlane received death threats. People were legitimately angry about a fictional dog's death, which says something about how attached viewers had become to these animated characters. The temporary death of Brian actually serves as a perfect example of how deeply fans connect with Family Guy's characters, even though they're supposed to be parodies and caricatures. When Brian was hit by a car and replaced by a new dog named Vinny, voiced by Tony Sirico from The Sopranos, social media exploded with outrage. There were online petitions, angry tweets, and even real-world protests. The writers had planned to bring Brian back all along. It was meant to be a multi-episode arc exploring how the family would cope with loss, but the reaction was so overwhelmingly negative that they cut the storyline short and resurrected Brian after just 2 episodes. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to create, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode that just aired, the writers were working on the initial script almost a year ago. This long production timeline sometimes creates weird situations where the show references current events that are no longer current by the time the episode airs, or misses major cultural moments entirely because they couldn't pivot quickly enough. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for were actually born out of necessity rather than creative choice. In the early seasons, episodes would often run short, and the writers needed quick ways to fill time. These random flashbacks and non-sequitur scenes were easy to animate and didn't require complex storytelling or character development. What started as a time-filling technique became the show's signature storytelling device, copied by countless other animated series. Let's dive into some character-specific weirdness. Stewie Griffin's distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally intended to be football-shaped at all. MacFarlane has said that Stewie's head design was meant to evoke a more oval, egg-like shape that would make him look unnatural and slightly alien. The football comparison only came up after the character was already established, and now it's impossible to unsee. Stewie's sexuality has been a topic of debate among fans for years, but MacFarlane has given conflicting answers about whether the baby is gay, straight, or something else entirely. In some interviews, he suggested that Stewie is gay, while in others, he said the character is too young for sexual orientation to be relevant. The ambiguity seems to be intentional, allowing viewers to interpret the character however they want while keeping the writers free to take Stewie in any direction the story demands. Peter Griffin's voice is actually just Seth MacFarlane doing an impression of a security guard he knew growing up in Connecticut. The guard worked at the animation studio where MacFarlane interned during college, and he would do this exaggerated New England accent that MacFarlane found hilarious. Years later, when he needed a voice for Peter, he remembered that security guard and based the entire character's speech pattern on him. The show's relationship with censorship has always been complicated and fascinating. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are still certain words and topics that are completely off limits for broadcast television. The writers have developed an entire arsenal of creative workarounds, using sound effects, cutaways, and strategic editing to suggest things they can't show explicitly. Sometimes the censored version is actually funnier than what they originally wrote because the restrictions force them to be more creative. Cleveland Brown's spin-off series, The Cleveland Show, was actually planned before Family Guy was even renewed for its 4th season. MacFarlane and the writers knew they wanted to explore Cleveland's character more deeply, but they weren't sure Family Guy would survive long enough to make it happen. When the show came back from cancellation stronger than ever, they were able to move forward with Cleveland's solo series, though it only lasted 4 seasons before Cleveland returned to Quahog. The character of Meg Griffin has gone through more voice actress changes than any other main character on the show. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg for the 1st season and part of the 2nd, but left due to scheduling conflicts with her film career. Mila Kunis took over the role and has been playing Meg ever since, but many fans still don't realize there was ever a different voice actress. Interestingly, Kunis was only 15 when she started voicing Meg, making her younger than the character she was playing. Family Guy's cancellation and resurrection story is one of the most unusual in television history. The show was canceled after just 3 seasons due to low ratings, but DVD sales and syndication reruns on Adult Swim introduced it to a whole new audience. The ratings for the reruns were actually higher than the ratings for new episodes had been when the show first aired. This success convinced Fox to bring the show back, making Family Guy the first canceled series to be revived purely based on DVD sales and cable reruns. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years, though casual viewers might not notice the changes. Early episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, while current episodes are created entirely using digital animation software. The digital process allows for more complex visual effects and faster production times, but some longtime fans argue that the hand-drawn episodes had a warmer, more organic feel. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Despite Family Guy's reputation for random stream-of-consciousness humor, every single cutaway gag and non-sequitur moment is carefully planned and scripted. The writers spend weeks crafting these seemingly spontaneous moments, testing them with focus groups and refining them until they hit just the right note of absurdity. What feels effortlessly random is actually the result of meticulous preparation and timing. The character of Quagmire was originally going to be named Quahog, after the town where the griffins live. But the writers realized that having a character and a location with the same name would be confusing for viewers, so they changed it to Quagmire at the last minute. The name Quagmire is actually a play on words, combining the idea of being stuck in a difficult situation with the character's, shall we say, adventurous romantic life. Death, the Grim Reaper character who occasionally appears on the show, was voiced by Norm Macdonald in his early appearances. Macdonald's deadpan delivery was perfect for the role, but scheduling conflicts meant he couldn't continue voicing the character regularly. Adam Carolla took over the role for several episodes before it eventually went to other voice actors. Death's inconsistent voice casting reflects one of the challenges of using celebrity guest stars for recurring characters. The show has featured some truly bizarre celebrity cameos over the years, but one of the strangest was Rush Limbaugh playing himself in an episode where Brian becomes conservative. Limbaugh recorded his lines during a commercial break of his radio show, and the writers had to work around his limited availability by keeping his dialogue minimal and straightforward. The episode aired during the height of Limbaugh's popularity, and his appearance generated significant media attention. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which allows the writers tremendous creative freedom, but sometimes confuses viewers who are paying close attention. Characters die and come back to life. Major events happen and are never mentioned again. And the timeline of the show makes absolutely no sense if you try to analyze it logically. This isn't accidental. The writers have explicitly said they prioritize individual episode quality over long-term story coherence. The show's merchandising success has been almost as impressive as its television ratings. Family Guy merchandise has generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, with everything from t-shirts and coffee mugs to video games and board games. The talking plush toys of Stewie and Brian were particularly popular, though they had to be carefully programmed to avoid saying anything too inappropriate for younger children who might play with them. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how they handle controversial episodes. The writers have an informal rating system for how potentially offensive each episode might be, and they adjust the marketing and promotion accordingly. Episodes that push boundaries harder than usual often air with less advanced publicity, allowing them to reach audiences without generating pre-broadcast controversy that might lead to censorship. The show's relationship with Fox Network executives has been notoriously rocky over the years. MacFarlane has been vocal about his frustrations with network interference, and several episodes have included not-so-subtle jabs at Fox's programming decisions and corporate culture. Despite this tension, Family Guy remains one of Fox's most valuable properties, giving MacFarlane significant leverage in creative disputes. Here's a production detail that most viewers never think about, but affects every single episode. The timing of animated comedy is completely different from live-action comedy because animated characters can move and react in ways that real actors cannot. Jokes that would fall flat in live action can work perfectly in animation because the visual possibilities are unlimited. The writers and animators work closely together to ensure that the timing of visual gags matches the rhythm of the dialogue. The voice recording process for Family Guy is also unique in the animation world. Most animated shows record each actor separately, but Family Guy often brings the main cast together for group recording sessions. This allows for more natural interactions and improvisation, though it also makes the recording process more expensive and time-consuming. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, so he sometimes has to have conversations with himself, switching between Peter, Brian, and Stewie within the same scene. As you're drifting off to sleep tonight, think about this final fact. Family Guy has now been on the air for over 2 decades, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. Kids who watched the first episode when it premiered in 1999 are now adults with children of their own. The show has outlasted multiple generations of network executives, survived cancellation, and adapted to completely different media landscapes, from broadcast television to streaming services. The Griffin family has become as familiar to many people as their own relatives, which is both impressive and slightly disturbing when you consider how dysfunctional that family actually is. But maybe that's the secret to Family Guy's enduring appeal. In a world where real families can be just as complicated and bizarre as the fictional ones we see on television, there's something comforting about knowing that no matter how weird your own family dynamics might be, at least you're not dealing with a talking baby who's constantly plotting world domination, and a dog who's writing the great American novel. Sweet dreams, and remember, life's a lot like Family Guy. Sometimes it makes perfect sense. Sometimes it's completely random, and sometimes you just have to go with it and hope for the best. Whether you're a longtime fan or a newcomer to the show, these facts give you a glimpse into the creative chaos that makes Family Guy such a unique entry in television history. Sleep well, and maybe you'll dream about Quahog tonight. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics! If you're settling in for some bedtime content about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving deep into the Griffin household with some fascinating facts that'll either help you drift off peacefully or keep you up thinking about just how wild this show really gets. Now, before we jump into our relaxing journey through Quahog, let me ask you something. Have you ever really stopped to think about how Family Guy has been part of our lives for over 2 decades? Since 1999, this show has given us countless laughs, memorable cutaway gags, and characters that have become household names. But tonight, we're going beyond the surface-level humor to explore some truly mind-blowing details you probably never knew. Here's something that might surprise you right off the bat. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. The network executives thought the show wasn't finding its audience. But here's where it gets interesting. Adult Swim picked up the reruns, and the show exploded in popularity. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. They brought it back in 2005, and it's been running ever since. Sometimes, the best things in life really do come back when you least expect them. Let's talk about the voice behind Stewie Griffin for a moment. Seth MacFarlane, the show's creator, originally based Stewie's voice on a combination of Rex Harrison from My Fair Lady and a generic posh English accent. But here's the fascinating part. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's sexuality has always been deliberately ambiguous. The character exists in this interesting space where his romantic interests shift depending on what serves the story best. It's actually a clever writing technique that keeps the character unpredictable and allows for more diverse storylines. Speaking of voices, did you know that Seth MacFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewterschmidt? That's 6 major characters, all coming from one incredibly talented vocal performer. When you think about it, MacFarlane is essentially having conversations with himself in most scenes. The man has to switch between these distinct personalities, sometimes within the same sentence. It's like being a one-person theater troupe. Here's a production fact that'll blow your mind. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial concept to final product. The animation process alone requires hundreds of individual artists working on different aspects. Every single movement, facial expression, and background detail has to be hand-drawn and then digitally colored. When you consider that the show produces over 20 episodes per season, you start to realize the incredible amount of work that goes into bringing the Griffin family to life. The show's famous cutaway gags weren't actually planned from the beginning. They evolved naturally as the writers found themselves wanting to include jokes that didn't fit into the main storyline. These random flashbacks and fantasy sequences became such a signature element that other animated shows have tried to copy the format, but none have quite captured the same spontaneous energy that Family Guy brings to these moments. Now, let's explore some character development that might help you see the show in a new light. Brian Griffin, the family dog, was originally going to be much more of a background character. McFarlane has said that Brian evolved into the show's voice of reason almost by accident. The writers kept finding themselves using Brian as a way to comment on Peter's more outrageous behavior, and gradually he became this intellectual counterpoint to the family's chaos. It's interesting how a character can grow beyond their original intended purpose. Here's something about the show's cultural impact that's worth pondering as you drift off tonight. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and broadcasts in over 100 countries worldwide. But the cultural references and American humor don't always translate perfectly. International versions sometimes have to completely rewrite jokes or replace cultural references with local equivalents. Imagine trying to explain a 1,980 seconds American pop culture reference to someone in rural Japan. The localization teams for this show deserve serious recognition. The relationship dynamics within the Griffin family actually reflect a lot of real family psychology, despite all the absurd situations they find themselves in. Take the sibling rivalry between Chris and Meg, for example. While it's exaggerated for comedic effect, it captures something genuine about how teenagers navigate their place within family hierarchies. Even the marriage between Lois and Peter, with all its dysfunction, touches on real issues that many couples face, just amplified to ridiculous proportions. One aspect of the show that's evolved significantly over the years is its approach to social commentary. Early seasons focused more on pure absurdist humor, but as the series progressed, it began tackling more complex social and political issues. The writers found ways to embed serious conversations about topics like religion, politics, and social justice within the framework of outrageous comedy. It's like sneaking vegetables into a kid's favorite dessert. The animation style of Family Guy has also undergone subtle but significant changes over the decades. If you compare early episodes to recent ones, you'll notice the color palette has become richer, the character movements more fluid, and the background details more elaborate. Technology has allowed the animators to add layers of visual storytelling that weren't possible in the better show's early days. Yet they've managed to maintain the core visual identity that makes Family Guy instantly recognizable. Let's talk about the show's relationship with music for a moment. Family Guy has featured hundreds of musical numbers over the years, from elaborate production numbers to simple character songs. Seth MacFarlane's background in musical theater heavily influences these sequences. Many of the songs are surprisingly well crafted from a musical standpoint, with proper verse-chorus structures and sophisticated orchestrations. Some episodes are essentially animated musicals disguised as sitcom episodes. Here's a fascinating detail about the show's writing process. The writer's room operates on a principle they call yes and, borrowed from improvisational comedy. When someone pitches an idea, no matter how outrageous, the group tries to build on it rather than shut it down immediately. This approach has led to some of the show's most memorable and bizarre moments. It's a reminder that creativity often flourishes when we suspend our initial judgment and let ideas develop naturally. The character of Meg Griffin represents something unique in television comedy. She's simultaneously the most normal member of her family and the one who receives the most abuse from everyone around her. This creates an interesting dynamic where the audience often sympathizes with her while still laughing at her misfortunes. It's a delicate balance that the writers have maintained for over 20 years, and it speaks to something deeper about how we treat people who don't fit into expected social roles. Cleveland Brown's departure to his own spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy created some interesting continuity challenges for the writers. They had to explain his absence and return in ways that felt natural to the ongoing story, while also acknowledging the real-world production reasons behind these changes. It's a perfect example of how television shows must constantly adapt to behind-the-scenes realities while maintaining narrative consistency. The show's approach to time and continuity is intentionally flexible. Characters age slowly or not at all, major events from one episode might never be mentioned again, and the family's financial situation fluctuates wildly depending on story needs. This loose approach to continuity allows for maximum creative freedom, but also creates opportunities for dedicated fans to spot inconsistencies and create theories about the show's internal logic. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Countless memes, viral videos, and social media trends have originated from or been inspired by the show. The phrase, "Oh no, he didn't," might never have become a cultural touchstone without Peter Griffin's dramatic delivery. The show's rapid-fire humor style has influenced how people create and consume comedy content online. The voice acting in Family Guy extends far beyond the main cast. Over the years, the show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest voices, from major Hollywood stars to political figures to fellow comedians. Some guests play themselves, others take on original characters, and a few have become recurring voices in the Family Guy universe. The casting directors have an impressive ability to match celebrity voices with characters that enhance rather than distract from the story. Here's something that might help you appreciate the show's craft as you wind down for the night. The timing of Family Guy's comedy is incredibly precise. Voice actors don't just deliver lines. They perform them with specific rhythms and pauses that maximize comedic impact. The editors then fine-tune these performances, sometimes adjusting timing by fractions of seconds to hit the perfect comedic beat. It's a level of precision that most viewers never consciously notice but definitely feel. The show's relationship with censorship has evolved significantly since its early days. Standards and practices for television have changed, allowing Family Guy to push boundaries that would have been impossible in its first seasons. At the same time, the writers have developed more sophisticated ways to be provocative without simply relying on shock value. It's an interesting case study in how creative people adapt to changing cultural standards while maintaining their artistic voice. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, consider how the show has managed to remain relevant across multiple generations of viewers. People who watched the show as teenagers in the early 2000s are now watching it with their own children. The humor that resonates with different age groups varies, but there's something universal about the Griffin family's chaotic energy that transcends generational boundaries. The production team behind Family Guy has created what amounts to a small animation empire. The success of the main show led to spin-offs, specials, video games, merchandise, and even live concert tours featuring the show's music. From a business perspective, Family Guy demonstrates how a creative property can expand far beyond its original medium while maintaining its core identity. Finally, as you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something special in the landscape of American entertainment. It's a show that dares to be completely ridiculous while occasionally touching on profound truths about family, society, and human nature. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who just discovered the show, there's something comforting about knowing that somewhere in the fictional town of Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into some new absurd adventure. The next time you watch Family Guy, you might find yourself noticing details you never saw before, appreciating the craft behind the chaos, or simply enjoying the comfort of familiar characters doing wonderfully unpredictable things. Sometimes the best. Entertainment doesn't try to change your life. It just makes the everyday world a little more interesting and a lot more fun. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow's another day in Quahog, and there's always another ridiculous adventure waiting just around the corner. Whether you're Team Peter, Team Brian, or even Team Meg, the Griffin family will be there whenever you need a laugh or just want to escape into a world where anything can happen, and usually does. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off to sleep, but your mind is still buzzing. Maybe you need something to help you unwind, something familiar and comforting that won't keep you too engaged. Well, tonight we're diving into the weird and wonderful world of Family Guy with some absolutely wild facts that might just be the perfect bedtime companion. These aren't your typical trivia tidbits. We're talking about the kind of behind-the-scenes secrets and bizarre details that make this show the cultural phenomenon it became. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right away. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, then came back in 2005, only to get canceled again in 2007. But here's where it gets interesting. The show's resurrection wasn't because of some executive's change of heart or a passionate fan campaign, though those things helped. It was actually because of DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim that proved the show had a massive audience that networks had completely missed. The numbers were staggering. When Fox looked at the DVD sales figures, they realized they'd made a colossal mistake. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, moving over 1 million copies in its first year. Adult Swim was paying Fox millions for the rerun rights, and the ratings were through the roof. It was like discovering you'd thrown away a winning lottery ticket, except you could still fish it out of the trash. But here's something even weirder about the show's cancellation drama. Seth MacFarlane, the creator, was actually somewhat relieved when it got canceled the first time. He was completely burned out from working insane hours, writing, voice acting, and overseeing every aspect of production. The guy was doing the voices for 3 main characters while running the entire show. When Fox pulled the plug, he thought his animation career might be over, but he also felt like he could finally breathe again. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's a fact that'll keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the flight that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He missed it because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, and he showed up to the gate 10 minutes after boarding had ended. He was hungover from partying the night before and almost didn't go to the airport at all. That single hangover and miscommunication might have changed television history forever. Now let's talk about something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single Conway Twitty cutaway gag. You know those random moments where the show just cuts to the country singer performing for what feels like an eternity? Those weren't just random filler. They were actually Seth MacFarlane's way of trolling both the network and the audience. He knew these segments would drive people absolutely crazy, but he also knew they couldn't be cut because they were integral to reaching the episode's required runtime. The Conway Twitty thing became such a phenomenon that it spawned its own internal mythology at the show. Writers would pitch entire episodes around how they could work in a Conway Twitty segment. They'd sit in the writer's room timing these segments down to the second, calculating exactly how much actual story content they could replace with a dead country singer performing on stage. It was comedic genius disguised as laziness. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's voice acting. You know how Brian the dog sounds so sophisticated and intellectual? Well, Seth MacFarlane based that voice on his own natural speaking voice, but slightly more pretentious. He said in interviews that Brian represents the version of himself he'd be if he let his college education go to his head. The character became a way for MacFarlane to explore his own intellectual insecurities and liberal political views through a talking dog. But the really fascinating part is how the other voice actors developed their characters. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different character on a different show MacFarlane was developing. When that project fell through, he remembered her voice and wrote Lois specifically for her. The character's Long Island accent and particular speech patterns are actually based on Borstein's own family members. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has admitted that he sometimes forgets he's supposed to be playing a teenager. He said the character's voice just comes naturally to him because it's basically his own voice from when he was going through puberty, which apparently lasted well into his 20s. The character's dim-witted, but lovable personality evolved because Green kept improvising lines that made the writers laugh during recording sessions. Now here's a production fact that'll make you realize how much work goes into seemingly simple animation. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 9 months to produce, from script to final broadcast. The writing process alone can take several months, with jokes being written, rewritten, and completely scrapped dozens of times. Then there's the voice recording, which happens in multiple sessions as scripts get revised. The animation process is where things get really wild. Every single frame has to be drawn by hand, even though the show uses computer software to assist with the process. A single 22-minute episode contains roughly 16,000 individual drawings. When you think about the fact that the show has produced over 400 episodes, that's literally millions of individual drawings that have brought these characters to life. But here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's cultural impact even more. Family Guy popularized the random cutaway gag format that's now become standard in animated comedy. Before Family Guy, most animated shows followed more traditional narrative structures. The show's willingness to completely abandon the main plot for a 30-second historical recreation or pop culture reference changed how comedy writers think about pacing and attention spans. The cutaway gags themselves have become a cultural phenomenon. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to compiling them, and they've been referenced and parodied by countless other shows. But here's what's really interesting. The writers have admitted that sometimes they write the cutaway gag first, then build an entire episode around finding a way to naturally lead into it. Let's talk about something that might disturb your peaceful drift toward sleep: the show's relationship with censorship. Family Guy has been censored, banned, and protested more than almost any other primetime animated series. The Parents Television Council has named it the worst show on television multiple times. But here's the thing. All that controversy has only made the show more popular. The censorship battles have led to some genuinely creative solutions from the writers. When they can't say certain words or show certain images, they find increasingly elaborate ways to imply them. Some of the show's funniest moments have come from these creative workarounds. It's like watching a comedian perform with their hands tied behind their back, and somehow becoming even funnier because of the constraint. Here's a fact about the show's music that might surprise you. Seth MacFarlane is actually a classically trained vocalist who's released several albums of standards and jazz music. His musical background heavily influences the show's frequent musical numbers and elaborate song and dance sequences. Those aren't just random additions. They're MacFarlane showing off skills he developed long before he ever got into animation. The musical episodes of Family Guy often take months of additional preparation because they require completely different animation techniques, additional voice coaching for the actors, and original orchestral arrangements. The Blue Harvest Star Wars parody episodes alone required hiring an entire orchestra to record new versions of John Williams' iconic themes. Now, let's dive into something that'll make you think about celebrity culture differently. The show's celebrity cameos and parodies have occasionally led to real-world consequences for the celebrities involved. Some stars have embraced being mocked on the show, treating it as a badge of honor. Others have publicly complained or even threatened legal action. But here's what's really fascinating. Some celebrities have specifically requested to be made fun of on Family Guy because they know it'll keep them relevant in pop culture. The show has become such a cultural touchstone that being parodied on it is almost like being inducted into a Hall of Fame of American entertainment figures. The writers have developed an entire system for deciding which celebrities to target. They consider factors like current relevance, comedic potential, and likelihood of legal retaliation. There's literally a legal department that reviews every celebrity reference to make sure the show won't get sued into oblivion. Here's something about the show's international appeal that might keep your mind wandering as you fall asleep. Family Guy airs in over 100 countries, but many episodes have to be heavily edited or completely banned in certain regions due to cultural sensitivities or government censorship. The writers have become experts at predicting which jokes will translate across cultures and which ones will get the show pulled off the air in entire countries. The international dubbing process is particularly fascinating. Voice actors in different countries have to capture not just the literal translations of the jokes, but also the timing, delivery, and cultural references that make the humor work. Sometimes entire scenes have to be rewritten for different markets, with completely different jokes that serve the same narrative function. Speaking of narrative function, here's something about the show's storytelling that might surprise you. Despite its reputation for random, stream-of-consciousness humor, every episode follows extremely strict structural guidelines. The writers use a detailed formula for pacing, character development, and plot progression that's remained virtually unchanged since the show's early seasons. The formula is so precise that new writers go through extensive training to learn it. They practice writing sample episodes that hit specific comedic beats at exact timing intervals. It's like learning to write music in a very particular key and tempo. There's way more technical skill involved than most viewers realize. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the voice actors even more. Most of the main voice cast records their lines together in the same studio, which is actually unusual for animated shows. Many animated series record each actor separately for scheduling convenience. But Family Guy's ensemble cast has developed such strong chemistry that they actually improvise and play off each other during recording sessions. These improvisation sessions have led to some of the show's most memorable moments. Jokes that weren't in the original script character interactions that reveal new personality traits, and entire comedic sequences that grew out of the actors just goofing around in the studio. The writers have learned to leave space in their scripts for this kind of spontaneous creativity. The show's relationship with current events is another fascinating aspect of its production. Episodes are produced so far in advance that writers have to predict what will be culturally relevant 8 to 9 months in the future. They've developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate which celebrities will still be famous, which political issues will still matter, and which pop culture references will still be funny by the time episodes air. Sometimes they get it spectacularly wrong, leading to episodes that reference celebrities who've completely disappeared from public consciousness, or make jokes about events that ended up being resolved in completely different ways. These temporal mismatches have become part of the show's charm, creating accidental time capsules of what people were thinking about during specific periods. Here's something about the show's merchandise empire that might occupy your thoughts as you drift off. Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandise sales annually, from t-shirts and mugs to video games and Halloween costumes. The licensing department has to approve thousands of product designs, ensuring that everything maintains the show's comedic voice while being commercially viable. The most successful merchandise items are often the most random ones. Stewie's football head design became a best-selling plush toy. Brian's martini glass became a popular bar accessory. Peter's chicken fight with Ernie became an entire line of action figures. These products have introduced the show to audiences who might never watch it on television. As we wind down our journey through the bizarre world of Family Guy facts, here's one last thing to ponder as you close your eyes. The show has fundamentally changed how we consume comedy. It's trained an entire generation of viewers to expect rapid-fire jokes, constant pop culture references, and narrative structures that can pivot in completely unexpected directions at any moment. This influence extends far beyond television. You can see Family Guy's impact in internet memes, social media humor, and even in how people tell stories in everyday conversation. The show's cutaway gag structure has become a template for how we process and share information in the digital age. Those random tangents and seemingly unrelated references? They're everywhere now, from Twitter threads to TikTok videos. The show created a new language of comedy that's become so pervasive we barely notice it anymore. When someone starts telling a story, then suddenly pivots to a completely unrelated memory that somehow connects back to the original point, they're unconsciously using a Family Guy narrative structure. When someone makes a reference to an obscure piece of pop culture from decades ago to explain something happening today, they're speaking fluent Family Guy. So there you have it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy, knowing that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing thousands of individual frames to bring new episodes to life. Voice actors are improvising lines that will make millions of people laugh, and writers are crafting jokes that will still be quoted years from now. The strange, wonderful, chaotic world of Family Guy continues to evolve, one random cutaway gag at a time. Sweet dreams. And remember, if you find yourself having weird dreams about talking dogs, evil babies, or inexplicably long Conway Twitty performances, you'll know exactly where those images came from. The show that changed comedy forever has probably infiltrated your subconscious too, joining the ranks of viewers who've been shaped by its unique brand of organized chaos. You know that feeling when you're trying to fall asleep but your brain just won't shut up? Well, tonight we're gonna fix that with some of the most random, weirdly fascinating Family Guy facts that'll have you drifting off to dreamland while learning bizarre trivia about America's most chaotic animated family. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the strange world of Quahog. Let's start with something that might surprise you. The show's creator Seth MacFarlane almost missed his flight on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. But he arrived at the airport just 10 minutes late and missed the boarding. Sometimes, being late really does save your life. This near-miss experience actually influenced some of the show's later episodes, though MacFarlane rarely talks about it publicly. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, did you know he voices 4 of the main characters? Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire are all brought to life by the same person. That's pretty impressive when you think about how different each character sounds. MacFarlane developed Peter's voice by imitating a security guard he knew, while Brian's sophisticated tone was inspired by old Hollywood actors. Stewie's accent, meanwhile, was based on Rex Harrison's performance in My Fair Lady. Here's something that might help you sleep better knowing it exists. There's an entire episode that was banned from television for years. The episode, called Partial Terms of Endearment, dealt with some pretty controversial topics and wasn't aired on Fox until much later. It eventually found its way to DVD releases, but for the longest time, fans had no idea this episode even existed. Sometimes, the most interesting content is the stuff we never get to see. Family Guy has this weird relationship with cancellation that's almost like a bedtime story in itself. The show was canceled, not once, but twice. First in 2002, then again in 2003. But here's where it gets interesting. DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox brought it back in 2005. It's like the show kept falling asleep and waking up stronger each time. The fans literally saved it through their dedication, which is pretty heartwarming when you think about it. Let me tell you about some of the guest stars who've appeared on the show that you might not have realized. Patrick Stewart, the distinguished Captain Picard himself, has voiced multiple characters including Susie's arch-nemesis. Rush Limbaugh appeared as himself, and even Phyllis Diller lent her voice to Peter's mother-in-law. The show has attracted everyone from political figures to rock stars, creating this weird mix of high culture and lowbrow humor. There's something oddly soothing about the show's animation process, too. Each episode takes about 8 months to complete from script to screen. The writers spend weeks crafting jokes, the voice actors record their lines multiple times to get the perfect delivery, and then teams of animators bring everything to life frame by frame. It's like watching a very slow, very detailed dream come together. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken started as a throwaway gag, but became one of the show's most beloved running jokes. These elaborate, destruction-filled battles were inspired by old action movies and Jackie Chan films. The animators love creating these sequences because they get to go completely over the top with the destruction and mayhem. There's something almost meditative about watching these absurdly long fight scenes unfold. Here's a fact that connects to real life in an unexpected way. The character of Mayor Adam West was named after the actor who played Batman in the 1960 Seconds TV series. When the real Adam West heard about this, he was so delighted that he agreed to voice the character himself. He continued playing the role until his death in 2017, bringing his own quirky charm to the already eccentric animated mayor of Quahog. The show's musical numbers are surprisingly complex productions. When they create songs like Surfin' Bird or any of their elaborate Broadway-style numbers, they work with professional musicians and composers. Seth MacFarlane, being a trained singer himself, often performs these songs live in recording sessions. The musical episodes require months of additional work, but they've become some of the most memorable moments in the series. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, ran for 4 seasons and had its own unique animation style that was slightly more polished than the original Family Guy. When Cleveland returned to Family Guy, the animators had to readjust his character design to match the original show's style. It's like he went away, got a makeover, and had to tone it down when he came back home. The show's pop culture references are researched extensively by a team of writers who specialize in different decades and cultural phenomena. They maintain databases of movie quotes, TV show references, and historical events to ensure their parodies are accurate enough to be funny, but absurd enough to avoid copyright issues. Sometimes they spend weeks perfecting a single throwaway reference that appears for just a few seconds. Stewie's sexuality has been a running mystery throughout the series, with writers deliberately keeping it ambiguous. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's character is meant to be fluid and open to interpretation. This ambiguity has led to countless fan theories and discussions, making Stewie one of the most analyzed characters in animated television. The Griffin House interior has been redesigned multiple times throughout the series, but the exterior has remained remarkably consistent. The house is supposedly located on Spooner Street in Quahog, Rhode Island, and the address is 31 Spooner Street. Fans have actually tried to locate this address in real Rhode Island towns, though of course it doesn't exist. Voice actress Alex Borstein, who plays Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different role. She was supposed to voice a minor character, but when they heard her natural speaking voice, They immediately knew she was perfect for Lois. Borstein has mentioned that she sometimes forgets to use Lois's voice in real life and accidentally slips into character during casual conversations. The show's writer's room operates like a comedy laboratory, where jokes are tested, refined, and sometimes completely scrapped. They have a policy where any writer can suggest changes to any joke, no matter how senior or junior they are. This collaborative approach has led to some of the show's most unexpected and brilliant moments. But it also means that some episodes go through dozens of script revisions. Brian's character was almost completely different in the original concept. He was supposed to be a regular dog who couldn't talk, but McFarlane decided that having an intellectual talking dog would create better story opportunities. This decision fundamentally changed the show's dynamic and gave them a character who could serve as both comic relief and philosophical commentary. The infamous Conway Twitty segments, where the show would cut to footage of the real country singer performing entire songs, were actually created as time fillers when episodes ran short. These segments became so popular with fans that the writers started including them intentionally, turning what was essentially animated dead air into a beloved recurring gag. Quagmire's character was inspired by radio DJs from the 1950 seconds and 1960 seconds who had that smooth, slightly sleazy on-air personality. Seth MacFarlane studied old radio shows and interviews to develop Quagmire's distinctive speaking style and his catchphrase, "giggity giggity." The character's appearance was based on classic cartoon characters, but with a modern twist that made him both nostalgic and contemporary. The show's relationship with censorship is fascinating. The writers often create jokes specifically designed to test the boundaries of what they can get away with on television. They'll write multiple versions of controversial scenes, knowing that some will be cut but hoping that the milder versions will make it to air. It's like an ongoing negotiation with the censors through comedy. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to embrace internet culture and memes before most people knew what memes were. The writers were early adopters of online humor and would incorporate internet jokes into episodes months before they became mainstream. This forward-thinking approach helped keep the show relevant to younger audiences who were spending more time online. The character of Herbert the Pervert was originally supposed to appear in just one episode, but his distinctive voice and creepy personality made him an unexpected fan favorite. The voice actor Alex Borstein came up with Herbert's characteristic whistle and speech pattern on the spot during recording, and it became such an integral part of the character that they couldn't imagine him any other way. Did you know that several Family Guy episodes have been turned into actual comic books? These comics expand on storylines from the show and sometimes feature adventures that would be too expensive to animate. The comic book format allows the writers to explore more complex storylines and include visual gags that might not work as well in animation. The show's approach to celebrity deaths is uniquely irreverent. When famous people pass away, the writers often create memorial segments that are simultaneously respectful and absurd. They've developed a reputation for handling these situations with a mix of genuine tribute and satirical commentary that somehow works better than it should. Joe Swanson's character was created specifically to address representation of disabled characters in animation, but the writers were careful not to make his disability the only thing that defines him. They wanted to show that wheelchair users could be action heroes, fathers, and complex characters with their own storylines and personality quirks that had nothing to do with their physical limitations. The show's animation studio has created detailed model sheets for background characters who appear for just a few seconds. They believe that consistency in character design, even for minor roles, helps create a more believable world. Some of these background characters have their own names and backstories that never make it into episodes, but help the animators understand their roles in Quahog's community. Family Guy's impact on internet culture extends beyond just memes and references. The show pioneered the use of cutaway gags, which became a template for online content creators who needed to create short, punchy comedy segments. Many YouTube comedians cite Family Guy's editing style as an influence on their own work. The series has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces unique challenges in adapting American cultural references for international audiences. In some countries, entire storylines have been changed to make them more culturally relevant, while maintaining the show's essential humor and character dynamics. As you drift off to sleep tonight, Remember that Family Guy represents something uniquely American about comedy, the ability to find humor in absolutely everything, from the mundane details of suburban life to the biggest questions about existence and meaning. The show's creators understood that laughter can be found anywhere if you're willing to look for it, and sometimes the most random, unexpected moments become the ones we remember most fondly. Sweet dreams, and may your own family adventures be slightly less chaotic than the Griffins. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy has been running for over 2 decades and somehow still manages to surprise us with its bizarre storylines and character developments? Tonight, we're diving deep into the twisted wonderland that is Family Guy lore, exploring every hidden detail, forgotten plotline, and mind-bending continuity that makes this animated universe so captivating. So grab your favorite blanket, settle in, and let's explore the chaotic genius of Seth MacFarlane's creation in the most relaxing way possible. Family Guy first premiered in 1999. Introducing us to the Griffin family in the fictional town of Quahog, Rhode Island. But what makes this show truly fascinating isn't just its crude humor or celebrity parodies. It's the intricate web of backstories, recurring characters, and interconnected plotlines that have evolved over more than 20 seasons. The show has created an entire universe with its own rules, physics, and logic that somehow makes perfect sense within its own context. Let's start with the patriarch of the family, Peter Griffin. On the surface, he appears to be just another bumbling cartoon dad, but his character has layers upon layers of complexity that have been revealed over the years. Peter works at the Pawtucket Patriot Brewery, a job he's held for most of the series despite his obvious incompetence. The brewery itself has become a character in the show, with its own history and significance to the town of Quahog. We've learned that the brewery was founded by Francis Griffin, Peter's father, who had a complicated relationship with his son that influenced much of Peter's behavior and worldview. Peter's ancestry is surprisingly diverse and complex. Throughout the series, we've discovered that he has Irish, German, and even extraterrestrial lineage. His Irish heritage connects him to Mickey McFinnigan, a character who represents Peter's more aggressive and confrontational side. The German connection links him to Franz Gutentag, revealing Peter's capacity for both creativity and destruction. These ancestral connections aren't just throwaway gags, but actually inform Peter's personality and explain some of his more extreme behaviors. The Griffin house itself is a character with its own mysteries and secrets. Located at 31 Spooner Street, the house has witnessed countless bizarre events and transformations. The basement has served as everything from a speakeasy during Prohibition flashbacks to a torture chamber in various episodes. The house's layout seems to change depending on the needs of each episode, but certain elements remain consistent, creating a sense of familiarity and comfort for longtime viewers. Lois Griffin brings her own rich backstory to the family dynamic. Born into the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, she gave up a life of luxury to marry Peter, a decision that continues to baffle her parents throughout the series. Her musical talents, particularly her piano skills, have been a recurring element that adds depth to her character. Lois has also demonstrated surprising combat skills and strategic thinking, suggesting a more complex personality beneath her patient housewife exterior. The Pewterschmidt family fortune adds another layer to the show's mythology. Francis Pewterschmidt's wealth comes from various questionable business ventures, including connections to organized crime and political corruption. This background creates interesting dynamics when the Griffin family interacts with Lois's relatives, often highlighting the contrast between Peter's working-class sensibilities and the upper-class world Lois left behind. Meg Griffin represents one of the most interesting character developments in the series. Initially portrayed as a typical teenage daughter, Meg has evolved into something much more complex. Her treatment by the family serves multiple narrative purposes, from comic relief to social commentary. But beneath the surface abuse lies a character with remarkable resilience and hidden depths. Meg has demonstrated extraordinary survival skills, leadership abilities, and even psychopathic tendencies that suggest she may be the most dangerous member of the Griffin family. The show has explored Meg's potential futures in various episodes, showing her as everything from a successful businesswoman to a hardened criminal. These glimpses into alternate timelines reveal that Meg's current situation may be holding back someone with tremendous potential for both good and evil. Her relationship with her family, particularly her father, reflects broader themes about family dynamics and the impact of emotional abuse on personal development. Chris Griffin embodies the innocent chaos that runs through the Griffin family DNA. His artistic talents and creative imagination often serve as windows into the show's more surreal elements. Chris's drawings and stories frequently predict or parallel the main plot lines, suggesting he may have some form of prescient abilities. His relationship with his imaginary friend and various supernatural encounters hint at a deeper connection to the mystical elements that occasionally surface in the show. The youngest Griffin, Stewie, presents perhaps the most complex character in the entire series. His intelligence fluctuates dramatically depending on the needs of each episode, but his core personality remains consistently fascinating. Stewie's relationship with time travel has become central to the show's mythology, allowing for exploration of alternate timelines and potential futures. His scientific genius enables him to create impossible inventions that somehow function within the show's universe. Stewie's sexuality has been handled with surprising nuance throughout the series. Rather than making definitive statements, the show has allowed his character to evolve naturally, exploring themes of identity and self-discovery in ways that feel authentic despite the absurd context. His relationships with other characters, particularly Brian and Chris, reveal different aspects of his personality and emotional development. Brian Griffin occupies a unique position as both pet and family member. His intellectual pretensions and political opinions often serve as a voice of reason within the chaotic Griffin household, though his own flaws and hypocrisies are regularly exposed. Brian's writing career provides commentary on artistic ambition and the struggle for creative success. His various romantic relationships and personal failures make him one of the most relatable characters. Despite being a talking dog, the show has explored Brian's mortality in ways that other animated series rarely attempt. His near-death experiences and actual temporary death created genuine emotional moments that demonstrated the show's capacity for sincere storytelling alongside its trademark irreverence. Brian's relationship with alcohol and his struggles with depression add layers of complexity that elevate him beyond simple comic relief. Quahog itself functions as more than just a setting for the Griffin family's adventures. The town has its own history, politics, and culture that influence the stories and characters. The Drunken Clam serves as Peter's primary social hub, where he interacts with his core group of friends. These friendships have evolved over the years, revealing backstories and dynamics that enrich the overall narrative. Cleveland Brown's departure and subsequent return to the show created interesting continuity questions and opportunities for character development. His friendship with Peter predates the series and provides stability in Peter's otherwise chaotic social life. Joe Swanson's paralysis and his career as a police officer create dramatic tension and opportunities for both humor and genuine emotion. Glenn Quagmire represents the show's most controversial character, whose extreme behavior serves as commentary on toxic masculinity and social boundaries. The recurring villains and antagonists in Family Guy create ongoing narrative threads that connect episodes across seasons. Ernie the Giant Chicken represents Peter's capacity for holding grudges and his tendency toward extreme responses to minor slights. Their elaborate fight sequences have become legendary within the show's mythology, each one topping the previous encounter in terms of scope and destruction. The evil monkey in Chris's closet evolved from a simple sight gag into a character with his own motivations and backstory. The resolution of his conflict with Chris demonstrated the show's ability to address long-running mysteries while maintaining its comedic sensibilities. These types of character arcs show that even the most absurd elements of the show can be given meaningful context and resolution. Death himself has appeared multiple times throughout the series, establishing a mythology around mortality and the afterlife within the Family Guy universe. His interactions with the Griffin family suggest they occupy a special place in the cosmic order, perhaps explaining their ability to survive increasingly dangerous and absurd situations. The show's handling of religious and spiritual themes walks a careful line between satire and genuine exploration of existential questions. The multiverse concept has become increasingly important to Family Guy's storytelling approach. Episodes featuring alternate versions of the characters allow for exploration of different possibilities and character development paths. These alternate realities often reveal core truths about the main characters by showing how they might behave under different circumstances. The Road 2 episodes featuring Stewie and Brian's adventures in different locations showcase the show's ability to parody various genres while advancing character relationships. These episodes often feature higher production values and more sophisticated storytelling techniques, demonstrating the creative team's range and ambition. The locations themselves become characters, each presenting unique challenges and opportunities for character growth. Celebrity encounters within the show create a meta-commentary on fame and popular culture. Rather than simple cameo appearances, these interactions often reveal aspects of the Griffin family's personalities and values. The show's willingness to satirize celebrities, while also humanizing them, creates complex relationships between fiction and reality. The time travel elements introduced through Stewie's inventions have allowed the show to explore historical periods and potential futures. These temporal adventures often carry surprising emotional weight, as characters confront the consequences of their actions across different time periods. The rules governing time travel within the show's universe remain deliberately vague, allowing for maximum storytelling flexibility. Family Guy's handling of controversial topics demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of comedy's role in social commentary. By pushing boundaries and challenging taboos, the show creates opportunities for genuine discussion about difficult subjects. The characters' reactions to these situations often reveal their core values and moral frameworks, adding depth to what might otherwise be simple shock humor. The show's relationship with its own continuity creates interesting meta-textual layers. Episodes that acknowledge previous events or reference long-running jokes demonstrate respect for longtime viewers while remaining accessible to newcomers. This balance between continuity and accessibility requires careful attention to storytelling craft that often goes unnoticed. The musical elements throughout Family Guy serve multiple narrative functions beyond simple entertainment. Conway Twitty appearances became running gags that tested viewer patience while commenting on pacing and expectations. The original songs created for the show often advance character development or provide emotional release during particularly intense storylines. The animation style itself has evolved significantly since the show's debut, reflecting both technological advances and changing aesthetic preferences. The increased detail and smoother movement in recent seasons create different possibilities for visual storytelling and character expression. These improvements allow for more subtle emotional moments and complex sight gags. The show's international episodes and cultural references demonstrate awareness of global perspectives while maintaining its distinctly American viewpoint. These cultural explorations often reveal the characters' prejudices and assumptions, creating opportunities for growth and understanding. The research and attention to detail in these episodes shows respect for the cultures being portrayed, even when satirizing them. As we've journeyed through the vast landscape of Family Guy lore, we've discovered that beneath its irreverent surface lies a surprisingly sophisticated storytelling universe. The show's longevity stems not just from its ability to shock and entertain, but from its commitment to character development and narrative complexity. Each episode adds new layers to this rich tapestry, creating connections and possibilities that keep viewers engaged across decades of viewing. The Griffin family's adventures continue to evolve, promising new mysteries and revelations for future exploration. Whether you're a longtime fan or a curious newcomer, there's always something new to discover in the wonderfully chaotic world of Family Guy. Sweet dreams, and remember that in Quahog, anything is possible. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed scrolling through endless videos trying to find something that'll help you drift off to sleep? Most people go for rain sounds or meditation videos, but there's this weird corner of the internet that's discovered something completely unexpected: Family Guy lore videos. And honestly, it makes perfect sense once you think about it. Picture this: Peter Griffin's bumbling voice rambling about some ridiculous backstory while you slowly fade into dreamland. It's like having that one friend who tells really long, meandering stories that somehow become the perfect background noise for sleep. But here's the thing: Family Guy isn't just random jokes and cutaway gags. There's actually this incredibly deep, twisted universe hiding beneath all the chaos, and when you start exploring it at bedtime, something magical happens. Tonight, we're diving into the strangest, most soothing rabbit hole on YouTube. We're talking about Family Guy lore that's specifically designed to help you sleep. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll understand why millions of people are choosing Stewie's time travel adventures over counting sheep. Let's start with why this works so well. Your brain needs something engaging enough to distract from racing thoughts, but not so stimulating that it keeps you awake. Family Guy lore hits this sweet spot perfectly. The familiar voices create a sense of comfort, like having old friends nearby. The storylines are complex enough to occupy your mind, but delivered in that laid-back, conversational tone that naturally slows your heart rate. The beauty of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its structure. Unlike other shows that build tension toward climactic moments, Family Guy operates on this weird, episodic flow where nothing is too serious or urgent. Even when Peter is destroying the town or Stewie is plotting world domination, there's this underlying absurdity that signals to your brain that everything is okay. It's chaos, but comfortable chaos. One of the most popular sleep topics is Stewie's time travel timeline. Now, if you've watched the show casually, you might think Stewie's time adventures are just random episodes. But when you dig deeper, there's this incredibly complex web of cause and effect that spans decades. Stewie has literally shaped the Griffin family history in ways most viewers never realize. Think about it. In one timeline, Stewie prevents his own birth, which creates this paradox where he exists but shouldn't. In another, he saves his father's life, completely altering the family dynamic. These aren't just throwaway episodes. They're building blocks of an intricate multiverse where every action ripples through time. And when someone narrates this in a gentle, sleepy voice while you're tucked in bed, it becomes this dreamy exploration of cause and effect that naturally leads your mind into sleep. The time travel lore gets even more interesting when you consider Stewie's relationship with Brian. Their adventures through different eras reveal hidden layers of both characters. Brian isn't just the family dog who talks. He's this tortured intellectual who's lived through multiple timelines, sometimes remembering previous versions of events, sometimes completely oblivious. The complexity of their friendship across different realities becomes this beautiful, melancholy meditation on friendship and loyalty. What makes this perfect for sleep is how these time travel stories often end with everything returning to normal, or at least a version of normal. There's no real stakes because the show's format demands that the status quo be maintained. Your subconscious picks up on this pattern and relaxes, knowing that no matter how wild the adventure gets, the Griffin family will be okay by morning. Another incredibly soothing topic is the hidden depth of Peter Griffin's character. On the surface, he's just this obnoxious, immature father figure. But when you start examining his backstory, there's surprising emotional complexity. Peter's relationship with his own father, Francis, reveals layers of abandonment issues and the desperate need for approval that drives much of his behavior. The Catholic guilt that shapes Peter's worldview, his struggles with identity, his genuine love for his family despite constantly endangering them, all of this creates this rich psychological portrait. When narrated as bedtime content, Peter's flaws become almost endearing. He's not a bad person, he's just deeply human in the most ridiculous possible way. The show has quietly built this mythology around Peter's various jobs and failures. From working at the brewery to his brief stint as a country music star, each career represents a different aspect of the American dream gone wrong. But instead of being depressing, it's oddly comforting. Peter always bounces back, always finds something new to be enthusiastic about. His resilience becomes this gentle reminder that failure isn't permanent, that there's always another chance to mess things up in new and interesting ways. Lois Griffin's background provides another rich vein of sleep-friendly lore. Her wealthy upbringing, her musical talents, her complicated relationship with her parents, all of this creates this fascinating contrast with her current life. She chose chaos over comfort, love over luxury. When explored in that drowsy, contemplative tone that characterizes good sleep content, Lois becomes this complex figure who represents the compromises we all make for love. The show has revealed that Lois has this incredibly patient, almost saint-like quality that allows her to tolerate Peter's behavior. But occasionally, we see cracks in this facade, moments where her true feelings break through. These glimpses of Lois's inner life become fascinating character studies when presented as gentle bedtime analysis. Meg Griffin represents something even more interesting in the show's mythology. She's the perpetual outsider, the family member who never quite fits in. But when you examine her character closely, she's often the most sensible person in the room. Her isolation isn't really about her being unlikable. It's about her being different, more grounded than the rest of her chaotic family. The psychological dynamics of how the Griffin family treats Meg reveal uncomfortable truths about family structures and social hierarchies. But when explored as sleep content, these observations become philosophical musings rather than harsh critiques. Meg's resilience in the face of constant rejection becomes almost inspiring, a quiet testament to the strength of people who don't fit conventional molds. Chris Griffin's journey through adolescence provides another layer of gentle complexity. His artistic talents, his kind heart, his struggles with self-image, all of this unfolds against the backdrop of typical teenage challenges, amplified by his family's dysfunction. Chris represents hope in the Griffin universe, the possibility that the next generation might break free from destructive patterns. The show has developed this subtle running theme about Chris's potential. He's genuinely talented, genuinely caring, but constantly undermined by his environment. When narrated as bedtime content, Chris's story becomes this quiet meditation on nurture versus nature, on how children can maintain their essential goodness despite chaotic circumstances. Brian Griffin deserves special attention because he's arguably the most complex character in the entire series. He's an intellectual trapped in a dog's body, an artist struggling with mediocrity, a liberal idealist living in a conservative household. His pretensions and failures make him simultaneously the most relatable and most frustrating character. Brian's writing career, his romantic relationships, his drinking problem, his philosophical debates with Stewie, all of this creates this rich tapestry of middle-aged disappointment wrapped in surreal comedy. When presented as sleep content, Brian's struggles become universal human experiences filtered through the lens of absurdity. The relationship between Brian and Stewie forms the emotional core of many episodes, and their dynamic has evolved significantly over the show's long run. Early episodes portrayed them as adversaries, but they've developed into this unusual friendship between two intellectuals who understand each other's isolation within the Griffin household. Their conversations, whether they're traveling through time or just sitting in the living room, often touch on profound themes of mortality, purpose, and connection. When these moments are compiled and narrated as bedtime content, they become these surprisingly deep philosophical discussions that naturally lead the mind toward contemplative rest. The supporting characters in Family Guy have developed their own rich backstories that provide endless material for sleep-friendly content. Glenn Quagmire, despite his obvious character flaws, has this complex history as a pilot and adventurer. His relationship with his father, his military service, his various romantic entanglements, all of this creates this surprisingly detailed character study. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created interesting continuity questions that lore enthusiasts love to explore. The dynamics of the friend group, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart and come back together, these themes resonate on a deeper level when explored in that gentle, bedtime storytelling style. Joe Swanson's backstory as a police officer and his adjustment to life in a wheelchair provides material for surprisingly touching character exploration. His determination, his relationship with his family, his role as the moral center of Peter's friend group, all of this unfolds into rich character development that works beautifully as sleep content. The world building in Family Guy extends beyond the main characters to include the town of Quahog itself, the recurring locations, the background characters who appear across multiple episodes, the local politics and social dynamics. All of this creates a lived-in universe that feels surprisingly real despite its cartoon absurdity. The show has developed this consistent internal logic about how Quahog operates, from the local government to the business community to the social hierarchies. When explored as lore content, these details create this comforting sense of a complete world where everything has its place, even if that place is completely ridiculous. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture provides another fascinating avenue for sleep-friendly exploration. The show's countless references and parodies create this massive web of connections to movies, TV shows, music, and historical events. Tracing these references becomes like a gentle intellectual exercise that occupies the mind without overstimulating it. The cultural commentary embedded in these references often reveals surprising insight about American society, entertainment, and human nature. When presented as bedtime analysis, these observations become thoughtful cultural criticism delivered in the most relaxed possible format. The show's approach to continuity creates interesting puzzles for lore enthusiasts. Some episodes clearly exist in the same universe, building on previous events and character development. Others seem to exist in isolation, resetting everything back to a baseline. Understanding which episodes connect and which stand alone becomes this gentle mental exercise, perfect for bedtime. This flexible approach to continuity actually enhances the show's value as sleep content. Unlike serialized dramas where missing details might leave you confused, Family Guy's episodic nature means you can drift in and out of consciousness without losing the thread of what's happening. The animation style and visual storytelling in Family Guy contribute to its effectiveness as sleep content. The character designs are simple and comforting. The color palette is warm and familiar, and the pacing of visual jokes follows predictable patterns. Your brain learns to anticipate the rhythm of the show, which naturally promotes relaxation. The voice acting deserves special mention because the performers have developed these characters over decades. The familiarity of these voices creates an immediate sense of comfort and security. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, Alex Borstein as Lois, Mila Kunis as Meg, each voice becomes like a comfortable presence in your bedroom. The musical elements in Family Guy add another layer of sleep-friendly content. The show frequently features elaborate musical numbers that range from Broadway-style productions to simple character songs. These musical interludes often reveal character depths and emotions that regular dialogue might not capture. When compiled as sleep content, these musical moments become like gentle lullabies that showcase different aspects of the characters' personalities. Conway's witty performances, Stewie's show tunes, Peter's various musical adventures, all of this creates a diverse soundtrack for drifting off to sleep. The show's exploration of family dynamics provides universal themes that resonate regardless of the absurd context. The Griffin family, despite their dysfunction, genuinely cares about each other. Their conflicts and reconciliations follow familiar patterns that most viewers can relate to from their own family experiences. When examined as bedtime content, these family relationships become comforting reminders of the complexity and resilience of human connections. Even when Peter does something incredibly selfish or Stewie plots against his mother, the underlying love and loyalty always reassert themselves. The meta-humor in Family Guy creates another interesting layer for lore exploration. The show frequently acknowledges its own existence as a television program, breaking the fourth wall and commenting on its own production. These moments create this playful relationship between the show and its audience that enhances its value as comfort viewing. Understanding the real-world context behind certain episodes and jokes adds depth to the viewing experience without requiring intense concentration. The show's commentary on television, animation, and entertainment industry becomes gentle insider knowledge that enhances appreciation without demanding active analysis. The evolution of Family Guy over its many seasons provides rich material for comparative analysis. Early episodes had different character dynamics, different humor styles, and different production values. Tracing how the show has changed and developed becomes like following the growth of old friends. This long-term perspective on the series creates a sense of history and continuity that enhances its comfort value. You're not just watching random episodes. You're participating in this ongoing story that has unfolded over decades of real time. The fan community around Family Guy has developed its own theories and interpretations that add layers of meaning to seemingly simple episodes. These fan theories become part of the show's extended lore, creating additional content for exploration and discussion. When presented as bedtime content, these fan interpretations and theories become like bedtime stories shared among friends. They're speculative and playful rather than definitive, which makes them perfect for that drowsy state between wakefulness and sleep. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into social commentary and cultural criticism. The show has influenced animation, humor, and television production in measurable ways. Understanding this broader impact adds depth to individual episodes without requiring intense focus. This cultural context becomes another gentle layer of analysis that enhances the viewing experience. You're not just watching cartoons, you're experiencing a significant piece of contemporary American culture that has shaped entertainment and comedy. The merchandising and spin-off content around Family Guy creates additional universe expansion that lore enthusiasts love to explore. Video games, books, merchandise, and related media all contribute to the overall Griffin family mythology. These extensions of the core show become like supplementary reading that enhances understanding without being essential. They're bonus content that rewards dedicated fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. So there you have it, the surprisingly deep and genuinely soothing world of Family Guy lore designed specifically for sleep. What started as a simple animated comedy has evolved into this rich, complex universe filled with character development, cultural commentary, and surprisingly profound themes about family, friendship, and human nature. The next time you're lying awake at 3 a.m, scrolling through endless content options, remember that sometimes the most unexpected choices make the best bedtime companions. Peter Griffin's chaotic adventures and Stewie's time travel paradoxes might just be exactly what your brain needs to finally relax and drift off into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the multiverse of Family Guy, everything always works out in the end, which is exactly the kind of reassurance we all need before closing our eyes for the night.